In Santa Clara, the big question is not just who the 49ers are going to draft. The big question is what kind of team this franchise is choosing to be in this window. When the edge spot demands patience, the market offers depth, a name starts climbing the board, and even a new addition's comments turn into noise around Brock Purdy. It all points to the same thing: the right decision at the right time. If that kind of breakdown hits for you, drop a like and come with me. This first story hits a point a lot of fans do not love hearing, but real contenders have to face it head on. Priority is not the same thing as panic. Everybody knows the 49ers are expected to address edge in this draft. The question is when. And to me, forcing that move in round one just to calm outside anxiety could be exactly the kind of mistake that cuts value instead of strengthening the roster. When you look at the top of this class, the message is pretty clear. The biggest names are expected to go early: David Bailey, Arvell Reese, Reuben Bain Jr., and then names like Keldrick Falk, Akeem Messidor, and TJ Parker are all floating in a range that could disappear before San Francisco is even on the clock. And that is where the read gets tricky, because if that first wave is gone, the 49ers may be staring at a second tier of edge rushers that, while still interesting, does not necessarily give you a huge difference between the back of round one and the middle of round two. That changes everything, because based on the most common mock ranges, names like Cassius Howell, Zion Young, Malachi Lawrence, R. Mason Thomas, Gabe Jacobs, Derek Moore, and Danny Dennis Sutton could all come off the board between picks 33 and 64. In other words, there is volume here. There is more than one path. There is a real chance this team can find help in the second round without acting like the cliff starts at pick 27. Sure, the fear is real. 6 edge rushers could go early and trigger another run right at the top of round 2. That happens. Drafts turn into position runs all the time. But there is another side to it, and it cannot be ignored. Some teams have already addressed edge. Others may prioritize different spots. So it is not crazy at all to think one or even two of those names could still be there when San Francisco picks again. And this is where the most important part comes in: roster construction. If the internal gap between the 7th edge rusher and the 13th edge rusher is not that big, then the 49ers may be much better off hitting another position first and circling back to pass rush later. That is the kind of thinking that separates emotional franchises from serious ones. If you can land a higher value wide receiver in the first round and still get an edge with a similar grade in the second, that might be the exact sequence that makes the roster stronger overall instead of just making one need feel better. So no, I would not buy into a reach just so people can say the problem got addressed early. If the board pushes San Francisco to wait, I want to see this front office stay cold, steady, and smart. In a Super Bowl window, the mistake is not waiting 5 more minutes. The mistake is panicking while the board is still giving you better options. The second story has less glamour to it and a lot more roster logic. Derek Barnett is not the kind of name that comes in with huge headlines, but this is exactly the type of player a serious team has to know how to spot when free agency starts thinning out and the draft still has not solved everything. And the 49ers at this stage of the process have every reason to keep that radar on. Even with Osa Odigizua coming in, the defensive line still does not feel like a finished job off the edge. Nick Bosa is still the center of gravity in that group. Mykel Williams is part of the picture, but his health situation naturally matters in the evaluation. The rest of the rotation still needs a more trustworthy answer. So when a veteran is available with controlled cost, NFL experience, and useful production in limited snaps, you cannot treat that like late market noise. And Barnett brings exactly that kind of package. He is not a signing to become the face of the defense. He is not a gamble to carry the franchise. He is a move to strengthen the rotation, lighten the load, toughen up the front, and keep everything from falling too heavily on Bosa again. That has real value, especially for a team that struggled with its pass rush in 2025 and cannot afford to walk into another season hoping that problem fixes itself. What makes this fit feel logical is that it lines up with the kind of move teams usually make after the draft. If the board does not deliver everything San Francisco wants at edge, then a veteran like Barnett becomes a practical answer. Based on recent evaluations, he still showed value as a rotational pass rusher, posted pressures, sacks, and helped against the run too. For a contender, that matters a lot. Not every addition has to arrive stealing headlines. Some show up to keep the level from dropping once the season starts demanding real depth. So to me, the point here is simple. If the 49ers come out of the draft still wanting more security at edge, Derek Barnett is exactly the kind of name that makes sense to watch closely. Not as fantasy, as a smart complement. The third story steps into a different level of consequence, because now we are not just talking about patching a hole. We are talking about how the 49ers might try to put real force back into a defensive front that lost stability at the worst possible time. Last year, the team tried to reinforce that pass rush group with Mykal Williams in the first round and the Bryce Huff trade right before the season. But reality hit hard. Williams tore his ACL, which naturally puts pressure on the start of 2026. Huff, in a surprising move, retired with 1 year left on his deal. Bottom line, the issue is back on the table. That is where Malachi Lawrence starts to feel different. Brent Sobleski called the UCF defender the ideal first-round pick for San Francisco, and I get why. Not because he has to arrive as a complete every-down defender from his first snap in the league, but because his value seems to match the most honest version of this roster's need. The 49ers do not absolutely need an edge who is ready to play every down on day one. They need burst. They need physical tools. They need somebody who can step into pass situations and change the energy of the pressure. And that matches the read on Lawrence. His profile points to a player who, early on, could work really well as a designated pass rusher, coming in on specific packages, attacking third down, and helping create a faster front. And once you pair that with the idea of Mykal Williams kicking inside on certain looks, it starts getting dangerous for offenses. You put Nick Bosa on one side, Lawrence coming in with fresh legs and explosion, Williams moving around in sub-packages, and suddenly the defense starts looking aggressive again in a way this team badly missed. His career numbers back up the excitement too. Over 4 seasons at UCF, Lawrence stacked tackles, sacks, pass breakups, forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. That is not empty data. That is real production. And the fact that San Francisco brought him in for a top 30 visit this month only adds to the feeling that this interest is not being invented from the outside. The team wanted a closer look. The team wanted to measure it. The team wanted to find out whether this first-round fit is real. To me, the strongest part of this whole discussion is the investment logic. If the franchise believes Lawrence can come in early as a pressure specialist and grow into something bigger later, that makes a lot of sense in a defense led by Raheem Morris. That would not be a comfort pick. That would be a planned impact pick. And a contender trying to get back to the top of the NFC cannot treat planned impact like a luxury. That is why I look at Malachi Lawrence as a possibility that deserves to be taken very seriously. Not because the class forces it, but because the fit with the need, the rotation, and the bigger idea of rebuilding the pass rush feels way too strong to brush off as just another April rumor. The fourth story gets the fan base worked up for a very simple reason. When someone shows up in Santa Clara and even lightly brushes against that same lazy Brock Purdy narrative, the reaction is instant. And honestly, it should be. Jack Jones just got to the 49ers and already found himself in the middle of an unnecessary mess after old comments resurfaced of him using Purdy as an example in a discussion about how hard it is to play cornerback. His point was basically that cornerback can be made easier depending on the system, bringing up the same argument Cam Newton made in the past, with Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle helping make the job simpler. Then he added that it was not a direct shot at Purdy, that he was just using him as an example. Fine, but a contender fan base does not hear that kind of thing in a neutral way. Not after everything Purdy has already had to hear since he entered the league. Because the frustration here is not just about one isolated comment. It comes from the history. It comes from years of watching outside voices try to reduce the 49ers quarterback to a system product, like processing, timing, toughness in traffic, precision under pressure, and the ability to keep the offense alive are just automatic side effects of Shanahan. That conversation got old a long time ago, and the most annoying part is that it keeps showing up even after Purdy has produced with a full roster, with a depleted roster, in big games, in tight games, in situations where other quarterbacks protected by the media do not get half the criticism. That is why Jack Jones landed in hot water with the fan base so quickly. Not because he declared war on the locker room. Not because this is going to turn into some huge internal issue. Quite the opposite. Purdy does not seem like the type to make a show out of this or turn it into a public drama. But one thing is what happens inside the building. Another thing is the first impression you give a fan base that is already tired of this same disrespect, disguised as analysis. And honestly, Jack Jones could have made his point about cornerback being hard without touching this topic at all. He could have. He picked the wrong lane. Now he is going to have to make up for it on the field. Because in Santa Clara, talking about Brock Purdy like he is just being carried by the talent around him does not sound bold. It sounds stale. And I want to hear Niners faithful on this with no filter. After those comments, Do you treat this like a bad choice of words at the start of his run here? Or do you think Jack Jones already started out owing this fan base some respect? If I put these 4 stories together, the message is heavy and pretty clear. The 49ers are not in a place where they can confuse patience with comfort. If the board calls for cold-blooded patience at edge, then they need to have it. If the market opens the door for a veteran reinforcement, they need to react. If an impact talent fits the defensive plan, they cannot flinch. And if someone walks into the building repeating tired Brock Purdy narratives, he is going to have to prove himself fast. Santa Clara is still living under big team pressure, and I like it that way, because a roster with Super Bowl ambition cannot be handled softly. If you are riding this NFC race with us, subscribe to the channel and stay close.